Few in Afghanistan are looking forward to that election more than the Hazara. Once proud, they now feel oppressed, marginalized from any meaningful role in Afghan society. Today, we begin a two-part series on the plight of the Hazara. Here's Kim Berry-Brunhuber.
Legend has it their hearts beat with the blood of Genghis Khan, that they're descendants of the Mongol hordes that occupied most of Asia. Now, however, they're no longer conquerors. They're the vanquished, treated like mules, persecuted.
They have been targeted for almost a century.
At times, almost exterminated.
They were killing everyone.
Many Hazara have no rights.
The Uzbek come and say, beat him because he is Hazara.
Their slums have no infrastructure.
They have no water, they have no food, no job, nothing. They are going to die.
Their politicians have no say.
When I say something to a minister, it is different to another MP.
And their youths have no hope.
Things are getting worse.
But slowly, all of that is changing.
So much so, some are starting to believe the very future of Afghanistan might well be in the hands of the country's most mistreated and misunderstood people.
We are headed in the right direction.
So just who are the Hazara?
Numerically, it's the third largest ethnic group, making up about 19–20% of the population.
They're seen by many Afghans as invaders with an alien culture, foreign language, and heretical beliefs. But the reality is they're as Afghan as the carpets many of their children are forced to weave for pennies a day.
The Hazaras are mainly a group of people living in the central part of Afghanistan.
Afghanistan's rulers were usually from the Pashtun tribe, and like almost all Afghans, they're from the Sunni sect of Islam. The Hazara are Muslims too, but they are Shia.
Hazaras were openly said that you have two choices, either to convert to Islam, that is that your Shia religion is not, we don't recognize it as Muslim, or you have to leave Afghanistan, or you will be killed.
They killed 60% of Shia people during that time.
100 years later, the slaughter of the Hazaras would be repeated after the arrival of the Taliban. This is Bamiyan province, the traditional homeland of the Hazara.
They arrived at 4 in the morning, 3,000 Taliban in SUVs, and began burning down houses and executing civilians.
The Taliban's murderous fingerprints are etched into almost every home in Abdulaziz's village. These, he says, are bullet and mortar holes. He fought against the Taliban, but his men were outnumbered and the village overrun.
They lined up people by tools and shoot them. Further away down there, they took civilians and they cut off their heads. The Taliban aren't human.
And they weren't content to kill just the Hazaras they saw. So they set up a blockade of the Hazara areas so food couldn't get through.
More than 1 million people faced starvation. Mohammed Safar survived, but hundreds of his neighbors weren't as lucky.
When I watched the children starve, I was very sad.
A sad chapter for the Hazara in a tragic war that tore apart a nation. With the fall of the Taliban, things improved for the Hazara, but not as much as they expected. Thousands fled to Kabul during the war. Many Hazara who came back from refugee camps in Iran and Pakistan say they now feel like refugees in their own country.
I was a refugee and I came back from Iran. Now we have to sleep in our cots. I'm going to die, certainly. You can see it with your eyes.
Most Hazaras in Kabul live in poor Hazara-only neighborhoods like this one, with less access to water, power, and sanitation than the other areas in the city. But many feel settling elsewhere would have deadly consequences.
Abdul Manan almost found out the hard way.
He said to other Pashtun, I have a Hazara working for me, come and beat him. Then they beat me and abused my wife. They threw her and one of my sons in a river. I complained to the Human Rights Commission and the police station, but no one paid attention to me.
Now he and his family squat by the mosque, living on handouts. A long fall for a proud man.
Now I have no house. You can see my sons. They have no clothes. I have no money. But I'm sad because I have no future.
The future of the Hazaras was supposed to improve under the new coalition government, which pledged to treat all of its citizens fairly. Some experts insist the ethnic divisions are disappearing now that all groups have representatives appointed to key government posts. But many feel those Hazara faces are just window dressing.
According to the law, I have the same power as the others have. But according to the situation of Afghanistan, I don't have those power who the other.
They are cheating us because we are Hazara.
This is the road to Bamiyan city, but our crew never made it there. A local group barricaded the road because they say the government is ignoring them.
They never pay attention to us. For example, there is no head of police that's Hazara. None of the staff in the government office are Hazara. You're closing the road until they're listening to us.
This is just a group of angry old men with no weapons and plenty of tea. But what happens when the Hazara youths feel they have no voice and no choice but to strike back? The answer to that question,
The problems of our country,
and more on the Hazara and the future of Afghanistan tomorrow. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Kabul.
Well, there's no doubt life has been difficult for Afghan civilians in recent years. The Hazara was once a proud society in Afghanistan. Descendants of Genghis Khan, they are a Shia minority in a predominantly Sunni country. Today, they are oppressed and marginalized. Now, the conclusion to our two-part series on the plight of the Hazara. Here's Kim Brunhuber.
Ayub Ahmadi struggles under the weight of thousands of shoes. Shoes he could never dream of buying with a salary of less than $2 a day.
this is very heavy, but I cannot find you other job.
He can't find a job because he's Hazara. Of the 6 ethnic groups in Afghanistan, the Hazara occupy the bottom rung in this country. These descendants of Genghis Khan and the Mongol invaders that conquered Asia have now, in many cases, been reduced to the status of pack animals. Their children forced to work for pennies a day weaving carpets. Most Hazaras say they can't leave their slums to look for work in areas dominated by other ethnic groups because the consequences could be deadly.
I cannot go any other area to work because I'm afraid. If I live here, they will kill me because they will say, you are Hazara.
Unlike most Afghan Muslims who are Sunni, the Hazara are Shia. Because of this, during the 1800s, 2 out of 3 Hazaras in the country were put to death by their own king. 100 years later, the Taliban tried to exterminate them.
It has been an ethnic group that had been totally disfranchised, marginalized, and oppressed for about 2 long centuries.
Now, there are Hazara politicians, some in important posts, but many of them insist they're actually powerless.
I am Hazara, and I think when I say something to a minister, it is different to another MP.
So far, Hazara protests have been non-violent, but some feel that's about to change.
The problems of our country.
This teacher says the problems are getting worse, and the restless Hazara youth might soon turn to violence.
Really, it is frustrating, but in the future, we may have, worse than this one.
Why do you say that?
Because due to the problems that I can tell you, sir, and the problems are increasing.
But if the problems in Afghanistan are increasing, so too are the number of Hazaras who are fighting for change.
They stand behind the government and behind the new democratic process in Afghanistan, and they've really bought into the education.
During the war, Javed Zirak came to America to study. Though his brain was firmly in East Kentucky, his heart never left Kabul.
When I went to the States, I always had this, this mission, in a way, to study, to excel at my studies, and then to come back to Afghanistan to contribute.
This professor did just that. In the 80s, he emigrated to the U.S. and became a successful executive at Sony, earning more than $100,000 a year. Now he's back in Kabul, by choice. No luxuries, and 1/3 of the salary.
Now it's time for me to come back and see if I can extend some of that opportunities to my people in general, to the people of Afghanistan in general, and to my ethnic group, Hazaras in particular.
Despite the increase in religious and ethnic violence, there's another more positive trend, a surge in the number of Hazaras going to university.
And that's a really hopeful thing, because that, I think, injects a lot of talent for the greater good of the country.
Zirak hopes to run for office one day, and maybe, just maybe, become the country's first Hazara president.
You know, I often look at the history of the United States and, you know, the civil rights movement there. And it's always been inspiring to me the way that that country has come in not a very long time. You know, you go from systematic segregation that is part of the law, Jim Crow and everything, to where a black person is having a serious shot at becoming the president of the most powerful country on earth. And this is really inspiring.
Millions of Hazaras hope to one day find their own Obama, a Hazara man or woman to lead a blood-soaked nation over the divides others have exploited, and to free the children of Genghis Khan from being entangled by a life of cheap carpet threads or crushed under the weight of other people's shoes. Kim Brunhuber, CBC News, Kabul.